Feng Xiu awakens abruptly, jumping up on the bed as the faint light of the screen flickers nearby. His eyes widen in horror, pupils trembling, and cold sweat trickles down his temple. Before him is a frightening sight. The ceiling is scrawled with ominous, chaotic writings, glowing in the darkness. His heart races and he breathes heavily, trying to comprehend what is happening and find an explanation. The inscriptions disappear, leaving only emptiness, but his doubts and worries keep him on his toes. Feng Xiu breathes heavily, leaning on the bed, his thoughts confused. The inscriptions were too real. He looks around, a chill running down his back. The room seems familiar, but something is wrong. The darkness distorts the space, the air is pressurized, and the feeling of alienness is truly terrifying to him. His gaze clings to the table, food and trash left untouched, as if time had frozen. With trembling hands, he covers his face, trying to comprehend what is happening, but his fear only grows. Feng Xiu recalls his past, two orphans with similar appearances but different fates. One succeeded thanks to the help of kind people, the other chose an ordinary life. But even if it's transmigration, what were those strange bloody inscriptions he saw on the ceiling? The memories of the former owner of the body don't contain anything like that. Everything seems too mysterious. An unexpected voice makes him flinch. Someone is affectionately calling him for breakfast. Feng Xiu freezes as a woman appears in front of him, softly calling out to him in an affectionate voice. He is stunned. In this parallel world, is he already married? The woman smiles, sits down next to him, and gently calls him for breakfast again. Feng Xiu stares silently out the window, realizing that without time travel, this would not have been possible. He smiles faintly. He could never have such a beautiful and kind wife in his life. Feng Xiu hesitates, not knowing how to properly address the woman who calls herself his wife. His face is flushed and his thoughts are confused. How can he even address her? He tries to remember her name, because the memories of the body's former owner must be in his head. Trying to stay calm, he strains his mind, but he can't get the information he needs. Instead, ominous images flashes through his mind, imbued with menace and scarlet lettering. Feng Xiu looks anxiously at the woman in front of him, her smile seeming strangely unnatural. A chill runs down his spine as he strains his voice to ask her the only possible question. Suddenly his wife's image is distorted, her face is covered in rot, her mouth stretched in a maddening grin. His body is frozen with terror, his thoughts confused, but he tries to keep control of himself. The creature angrily shouts out that he can see it, and lunges at him with its mouth open. Feng Xiu feels a sharp blow, a searing pain grips his body, and the world around him flashes with scarlet light. He falls down, his ears ringing, his heart pounding frantically, and his mouth screaming out words of terror all by itself. Rising on trembling arms, he breathes heavily, trying to comprehend what has just happened. His thoughts are confused. Was it all just a nightmare, or was he really dead? But as he glances forward, he sees the gruesome bloody inscriptions again, and anxiety grips his mind. Feng Xiu stares at the bloody inscriptions in horror. This is not a dream, everything is happening in reality. He notices the letters begin to fade away, as if leaving him a hint or warning. Covering his face with his hand, he tries to calm down, but his mind refuses to accept what is happening. The memories of the previous owner of the body contain nothing strange. He was an ordinary man. He had never seen anything supernatural, which meant that all of this only started after the transmigration. Feng Xiu sits pensively, realizing that his wife does not exist in the memories of the previous owner of the body. Cold sweat stands on his forehead. The idea that this creature could be his wife is absurd. He decides to ignore her as the previous owner of the body did, hoping to avoid unnecessary danger. The woman once again calls out to him in an affectionate voice, reminding him that it's already time for breakfast. Feng Xiu cautiously looks at her, trying to hide his fear, but the anxiety does not let him go. Feng Xiu feels terribly paralyzed, unable to move or even look away. The woman suddenly turns over, her movements seeming strange, as if she is breaking the laws of physics. His heart clenches as he realizes her behavior is out of the ordinary. She smirks as she sticks out her unnaturally long tongue, filling the air with a sinister giggle. Feng Xiu freezes as her tongue wraps around his neck and she whispers, "Can you see me?" Feng Xiu feels a sharp pain, and then a scarlet light floods everything around him. His body is being torn apart. He jumps up in the bed with a scream, breathing heavily, realizing that he was in the same room again. Clenching his fists, he curses furiously, realizing that someone or something is playing him like a puppet. Covering his face with his hands, he tries to gather his thoughts. Is this reality or an endless nightmare? His mind frantically searches for answers. Is this a death loop, a save point, or something even scarier? Feng Xiu lowered his head, trying not to look at her, hoping that it would make a difference. The woman herself walks up to him, as if testing to see if he can actually see her. He is distracted by his phone for a second, noticing something important before he hears her voice again. She's calling him for breakfast again, her tone sounding gentle, but now he can hear a slight tension in it. Feng Xiu flinches as she comes closer, and there is a note of concern in her voice. Feng Xiu nervously presses the phone to his face, and the woman stares at him intently, noticing his strange behavior. He tries to remain calm, wondering if there is anything he can do to influence the situation. His heart races, but thankfully she shows no suspicion and reacts as usual. His fingers tremble as he stares at the screen, however, and a sudden movement causes him to freeze. The reflection on the phone shows a woman lying in the bathtub, smiling slyly, and asks, "Do I look good?" Feng Xiu recoils back in horror, his heart pounding frantically and his breath catching. He clutches the phone in his hands, cold sweat dripping down his face, but he can't look away. The woman approaches sharply, her face contorted and an ominous red light flashes from her dark eyes. Her mouth breaks into a mad grin, exposing sharp teeth, and she growls, "You can see me." Feng Xiu cries out, his voice trembling with fear, but he blurts out, "Yes, I can see you." The woman rushes forward, her tongue outstretched and her crazy scarlet eyes flashing with bloodlust. Feng Xiu tries to dodge, but sharp teeth sink into his shoulder, tearing the flesh. Pain pierces through his body, but he grits his teeth and grabs her arm, trying to fight back. The creature with a maniacal grin tears off a chunk of his flesh and chews greedily. This time, however, it is not frightened, it laughs hoarsely, happy that it has not been eaten completely. Feng Xiu blinks tiredly, his gaze blank. The endless deaths have exhausted him to the point of exhaustion. The soft voice calls out to him again, and he already knows in advance what will happen next. Even after the 6th rebirth, he still flinches when his wife approaches him. Another mistake, another death, he screams trying to escape, but the door remains locked. On the 8th time he realizes, if you can't escape, the only thing left to do is to accept the game. Feng Xiu relaxes, smiling at the woman, her voice sounding soft, as if everything is fine. He laughs hoarsely, allowing himself to accept this game. After all, there is no point in resisting. After 13 deaths, he's already desperately looking for death, letting it do anything. Some people are alive but long dead, others are insane but still thinking clearly. With each rebirth, he gains the memories of the previous owner and begins to understand this world. Feng Xiu is once again drowning in the scarlet haze. The only difference from last time is his humility. This world is filled with strange and frightening stories, the number of them clearly exceeding the norm. The 18th death is another cycle of pain and realization, but he no longer panics. Why does he keep dying and being reborn, and why do the bloody inscriptions disappear after being read? Are creatures like her behind all these urban legends? Feng Xiu squints, he finally realizes that she is not just a monster, but a true trickster. Anger bubbles up inside him, as long as he lives, he will surely find a way to destroy her. She calls him for breakfast again, her voice sounding gentle, but he is no longer fooled. Feng Xiu notices a strange detail, she never touches him first. Her lips stretch in a mysterious smile, and she quietly asks, "Or do you want to be eaten first?" Feng Xiu freezes as the woman approaches again, her voice sounds sweet, but there is a hidden threat in her eyes. He pretends not to notice her, but he can sense it, she's waiting for confirmation that he sees her. While she hesitates, he remains cautious, realizing that she only acts with certainty. The woman smiles affectionately, promising a cooked breakfast, but something in her words doesn't add up. He chuckles to himself, beautiful women know how to deceive, as there isn't even any food on the table. Feng Xiu holds his glass quietly, contemplating his exceptionalism in this world. He reaches for the door, ready to go out, but his hand freezes on the knob. From behind the ajar door, eyes full of hidden anxiety and pleading look at him. If he stays, she will have an opportunity to carry out her plan. He firmly decides, no one will get away with it after killing him 18 times. Feng Xiu paces down the dark corridor, firmly knowing that no one will go unpunished. His eyes reflect determination and his thoughts are filled with one word, revenge. He must deal with this strangeness, find a way to end it once and for all. When the time comes, he will return here to finish what he started. Someone's hand turns the doorknob, and a blinding light flashes beyond the threshold. Feng Xiu freezes, looking around in bewilderment as the purple light floods the entire space. His eyes are wide open, cold sweat dripping down his skin. What is this place? Images of horror and carnage flash before him, bodies falling into endless darkness. Loud laughter ripples through the air, filling the space with madness and a strange euphoria. A man with a manic smile covers his eye with his hand, whispering admiringly about the beauty of this world. Feng Xiu breathes heavily, shaken by a bout of nausea, his body unable to withstand the overload. Someone's voice breaks the silence, anxiously asking what happened to him. A little girl stands in front of him, looking at him with large eyes with slight consternation. He straightens up, forcing himself to smile, and corrects himself. He should be called Big Brother. Looking at her, Feng Xiu glimpses that it would be nice to have such a cute daughter. A monstrous grin flashes in the darkness, and an ominous voice resounds beside Feng Xiu. He slowly turns his head, realizing that this vision is addressed to him. A giant figure looms overhead, brandishing a weapon, repeating the same ominous question. Feng Xiu bursts into laughter, marveling at the scene, as if watching a grand spectacle. He smiles even wider, recognizing that he likes himself much more than before. Feng Xiu points his finger at the monster without a shadow of fear, savoring the moment. His eyes sparkle with mad delight as he gleefully announces the upcoming slaughter. A flash of rage and a moment of absolute darkness all disappear in a bloody whirlwind. He opens his eyes abruptly, lying on the bed, his face impassive. A familiar voice sounds nearby, urging him to wake up, because eating breakfast 20 times a day is exhausting. Feng Xiu observes his surroundings and concludes that the world is full of strange things. A woman with a non-human aura appears in front of him, holding a phone and posing with a monster. Some creatures look frightening but are unable to interact with reality, others are no different from humans. Some play roles, getting close to their targets before striking. The thought of the resemblance to his wife makes Feng Xiu tense up, the realization of something important piercing his mind. Feng Xiu looks at his account balance and realizes that he needs money urgently. A message from his boss appears on his phone screen, demanding a report on his work. He remembers the commission for the sale of the villa, which has not yet been paid. Without hesitation, Feng Xiu replies that he quit his job but is going to collect the money owed to him. The sunset sky colors the streets with warm light as he heads towards the meeting place. The wheels slip sharply on the ground, and Feng Xiu stops in front of an unknown building. The flickering light of the signboard casts ominous shadows, and there is an unsettling silence all around. He looks around, realizing that the place looks nothing like he expected. The question sounds itself: is this really the sales office he was headed for? A sign hangs in front of him, and the sudden realization makes his heart freeze. The loud ringing of the phone causes Feng Xiu to freeze in place, breaking the oppressive silence. He answers the call, hearing a concerned voice asking why it took him so long to pick up the phone. A co-worker irritably complains that his boss has called him dozens of times and made him work overtime. Feng Xiu glances at the ominous facade of the building, realizing that this is clearly not a sales office. The thought that the hospital might be just as creepy as the academy piques his interest. Feng Xiu takes a step forward but suddenly collides with something soft, losing his balance. He raises his head and meets the girl's gaze, her expression a mixture of surprise and indignation. The thought that the entrance to the hospital might be closed in some strange way flashes through his mind. Feng Xiu's eyes widen as he realizes exactly where he had inadvertently placed his hands. A moment later, a sharp blow sounds and his body is thrown back with force. The girl yells at Feng Xiu, accusing him of an indecent act and threatening to file a complaint. The people around her start to notice the commotion. Someone recognizes her and curiously asks what happened. Feng Xiu is distracted from the situation, noticing a building with a sign White Willow Academy in front of him. His eyes flash with alarm and a sudden realization of what is happening flashes through his mind. He raises his head and realizes with astonishment that the academy has once again disappeared without a trace. Feng Xiu stretches his hand forward, but his fingers pass through the wall as if it doesn't exist. He realizes that he can see the building, but is unable to touch it physically. The realization comes instantly. Like other strange things, the hospital requires special conditions to interact with. Suddenly, the space around him distorts, and his body rapidly falls into a dark abyss. Feng Xiu falls down, but his gaze clings to something below, causing his heart to freeze. Feng Xiu looks around, seeing a dark, blood-stained hallway in front of him. The entire hospital is empty, but the thick, stifling smell of blood hangs in the wards. He stares at the wall in concentration, gingerly touching it with his palm, illuminated by scarlet circles. A resounding, lingering sound echoes through the building, breaking the dead silence. In the far corner of the room, a woman trembles, slowly looking up at the intruder. A creature with empty eye sockets emerges from the shadows, its voice sounding shrill and ominous. Feng Xiu walks through the shimmering veil without looking back as the woman watches him silently. He finds himself on the other side of the barrier, feeling the otherworldly energy thickening around him. A huge monster with many eyes suddenly appears in front of him, watching him with interest. Feng Xiu remains unfazed, realizing that there are dozens of strange creatures being held here. Feng Xiu notices the ajar chambers, realizing that the creatures might have broken out. An ugly figure appears in front of him, but he remains calm, suppressing his disgust. He chuckles, remembering what he has endured through endless murders at the hands of his wife. The scattered papers catch his attention, perhaps they contain important information. As he reads the document, he wonders, were all these entities once human? Feng Xiu irritably clutches the papers, realizing that the ghosts around him are just an illusion. Dark threads slip through his body, and he feels a strange, inexplicable pressure. He rises slowly, listening carefully to his surroundings, waiting for his next move. An eerie figure appears out of the darkness, its movements unnatural and its gaze piercing. The creature with a bandaged face looks at him and offers to unlock the mysteries of life together. Feng Xiu frowns, pondering that all the answers must be hiding in the headmaster's office. Deciding not to waste time, he heads straight to the source, ignoring the creature hanging in the air. The swanky interior of the building makes him wonder about the hospital's connection to the sales office. The first floor doesn't have the right office, which means he'll have to go higher. Suddenly a voice is heard, displeased that he is ignoring the demands of the supervisor. The irritated boss yells at Feng Xiu, reminding him that he has already been fired. Feng Xiu indifferently shoves him aside, musing that there is nothing useful on the second floor. The supervisor panics and demands to stop him, forbidding him from going up to the third floor. Disregarding the protests, Feng Xiu finally finds the principal's office sign. His hand reaches for the doorknob, but a loud, anxious scream echoes behind him. Screams of despair echo behind Feng Xiu's back, causing him to turn around. Someone is interrupted half-heartedly as a woman with smooth grace enters the room. Her image seems too seductive for such a tense environment. On the floor, the man crawls backwards in panic while the woman looks down at him. Feng Xiu calmly approaches, ignoring the furious accusations against him. Feng Xiu grabbed his opponent's wrist, but the man violently lashed out, recoiling backwards. The girl cried out in pain, demanding to be released, and someone nearby called out to her ally. She became furious and ordered to immediately chop off Feng Xiu's arm on the spot. Feng Xiu coldly struck her, causing her to stagger back, but she exploded with anger. He stared intently at the document lying in front of him, eyes blazing with determination. Feng Xiu gripped the rope tightly, rising up, a mysterious grin flashed on his lips. He felt that something truly sinister was lurking in this mental hospital. Unfolding the letter, he ran his gaze over the lines containing the mysterious message. The name that caught his attention was Zhou Qingfeng, who was referred to as the possible director of the hospital. Feng Xiu wondered if this letter was written specifically for him. Did the sender know? The light bulb flickered and shattered with a crackle, enveloping the room in an ominous darkness. A scream broke the silence, and Feng Xiu calmly looked up, pondering the cause of the malfunction. The girl turned around anxiously, and the man ordered her to check if the fuses had blown. Feng Xiu frowned at the phone screen, sensing that it wasn't just a simple blackout. His gaze became wary, the light from the flashlight reflected in his piercing eyes. Feng Xiu stared at the phone screen, but he didn't understand what exactly had gone wrong. He looked up and saw that the mental hospital seemed to have disappeared into darkness. The man tried to call, but there was no connection, and the girl next to him cried out fearfully. Another man with a smug smile claimed to have knowledge of the mysteries of this place. Feng Xiu frowned as he analyzed the strange surroundings. Everything pointed to something sinister. Feng Xiu grinned as he looked at the phone screen, realizing exactly where they had gotten to. One of the hospital staff was panicking, lamenting that he had lost an unsaved report. Another man irritably told him to stop complaining and check the fuses. Heavy footsteps sounded in the silence, someone slowly descending the stairs in the darkness. The guard announced that he would check the electricity while the others discussed possible problems. The hospital staff gathered around a table, anxiously staring at their device screens. One woman noticed that the flashlight on her phone was shining too dimly. The man next to her suggested just wiping the camera, thinking that was the reason. However, she had already tried it, but it didn't help, and her irritation grew. Feng Xiu frowned as he realized that his phone had also started to shine suspiciously weakly. One of the staff members noticed in a panic that the same thing was happening to his phone. Others began to discuss the realm of the weird, some doubtful, others horrified. A man shouted loudly, demanding silence to get to the bottom of the situation. He announced that he was about to say something important, something on which their survival depended. Everyone froze in tense silence, waiting to hear something truly terrifying. The man coldly stated that there were indeed ghosts in this world, and that was a fact. He explained that the realm of the weird was where they dwell, like another world. A sepulchral silence hung in the room, no one dared to speak first. Someone brought up Zhao's guard who had gone to check the electricity and didn't return. Another added that it was important to follow the rules in this place, or else one could be killed. The man panicked and asked what to do now, obviously hoping for an answer from the leader. The other coldly stated that the most important thing now was to find a way out of the realm of the strange. There was an ominous noise behind, and someone warned that everyone might be killed by a ghost. Feng Xiu felt a familiar sensation confirming his darkest guesses. Drops of sweat rolled down his face, his eyes widened with tense realization. Feng Xiu stood in the gloom, realizing that the ghost had manifested in this place once again. Someone questioningly asked where he was looking, not realizing where exactly the ghost was. The figure, entangled in sinister tentacles, stood silent in a frightening stillness. The other man chuckled irritably, deciding that they were just trying to scare them. Feng Xiu's eyes narrowed as he quietly said name, Wang Xiaoli. Wang Xiaoli disappeared in the blink of an eye, leaving behind only a frightening glow. A girl screamed in panic, claiming that she had just seen her beside her. The others looked around in horror, trying to figure out where she could have disappeared to. One of the men stunnedly admitted that this could be proof that ghosts existed. He turned to Feng Xiu and bluntly asked if he had seen what the ghost looked like. Feng Xiu calmly replied that his view was obstructed and he had only seen Wang Xiaoli disappear. The others nervously chatted, amazed at his equanimity in the face of possible ghosts. One of the men stared at him intently and asked if he was a spirit master. Feng Xiu frowned slightly, repeating that mysterious word to himself. One wondered, what was Feng Xiu's real status if he was reacting so calmly? The man explained that a master spirit was someone who was able to control his spiritual essence. He pointed out that the best way to survive now was for someone to master this ability. Feng Xiu wondered if it was possible to become a spirit master while in the realm of the strange. The other man was amazed at his equanimity even in such a critical situation. With a slight chuckle, he added that in order to do so, one must learn how to harness the power of ghosts. To become a spirit master, one must fulfill two conditions at the same time. The first is to experience the fear between life and death, awakening strong emotions. The second is to make contact with the ghosts, allowing their power to penetrate the soul. But this power is like a bloody cloth, inevitably leaving a mark on one's heart. Feng Xiu looked at his hands, feeling a strange energy filling his body. Feng Xiu looked at the ghosts lurking in the shadows, realizing their deadly threat. He wondered, if he increased his contact with them, could he gain the power to destroy them? The words spoken earlier echoed in his mind, causing a tense pause. Suddenly, ominous symbols and an eerie image of a woman appeared in front of his eyes. Feng Xiu looked around in horror, but the mysterious figure had disappeared, leaving only fear. The girl cried out in panic, realizing that Zhao Yang had disappeared right before her eyes. The man clenched his teeth and slowly exhaled, his gaze frozen in anxious tension. Another, in a fit of rage, shouted at everyone, demanding them to stop making noise so as not to attract ghosts. A frightened woman looked at him pleadingly, asking how to avoid disappearing. He replied coldly, causing everyone to wince, 2 to 3 minutes. Feng Xiu thoughtfully noted that there were exactly 2 to 3 minutes between disappearances. Someone clarified that Guard Zhao was the first to disappear, then Wang Xiaoli disappeared. After her, 2 minutes apart, Zhao Yang also disappeared, confirming the pattern. Feng Xiu glanced glumly at the screen, realizing that the next one would disappear in 3 minutes. The others froze in horror, realizing that one of them might be the next victim. Someone shouted at Feng Xiu, accusing him of being reckless and wanting to endanger himself. He coldly replied that he was looking for a way out, as standing still was certain death. The man with glasses roared, demanding him to stop, saying that he could not move mindlessly. Feng Xiu noted that there were 8 people left, and the pattern of disappearances was already obvious. The interlocutor exploded with rage, unable to believe that an ordinary person could understand anything. The man froze, his face contorted with fear and the realization of impending danger. Feng Xiu coldly threatened that he would kill him before the ghosts did. Someone frightenedly remarked that they had been walking for too long, but they didn't reach the stairs. Feng Xiu suddenly noticed a mysterious green glow ahead. His eyes widened. This light resembled the lamps from Qingshan Mental Hospital. One of the men rushed forward, hurrying to catch up with Feng Xiu, his voice trembling with fear. Feng Xiu stopped abruptly, his eyes widening with a sudden realization. The familiar corridors of Qingshan Mental Hospital stretched before him. The other person panicked, not realizing whether it was a vision or a terrifying reality. They realized that they were no longer in company. A long, creepy corridor spread out around them. Feng Xiu carefully examined the walls, realizing that the mental hospital had merged with reality. He realized that this explained the building's disappearance earlier, since they were now inside it. Immersed in thought, He wondered if this place was a true cursed zone. Looking around, he noticed bloody forms that resembled Zhao and Wang Xiaoli's uniforms. The man next to him grimly concluded that it takes 3 minutes to eat a man and less than that for a woman. Feng Xiu realized that the time difference of the disappearances coincided with how long it took for the ghosts to devour a victim. He realized that as long as the next creature was occupied by Jiao Yang, they had a short respite. Looking around, he noted that most of the ghosts were in the wards, but some had already made their way outside. Carefully examining the tattered cloth on the floor, he realized that the cuts had been made by something incredibly sharp. Feng Xiu frowned, realizing that this could have been the work of a creature he had encountered before. Feng Xiu realized that this ghost was different from the others, as it had been a doctor in his lifetime. An eerie figure hovered in front of him, its sinister smile suggesting mortal danger. He ducked sharply, catching movement, and a startled shriek sounded behind him. The loud sound of footsteps brought everyone to a standstill, the air filled with tense anticipation. Someone muttered in horror that they were supposed to be in the sales office, not here. Feng Xiu looked around and calmly remarked that this place looked more like a hospital. One of the men asked if he or Zhao Hao had noticed something strange earlier. Suddenly, there was a scream and someone exclaimed in horror that there was blood everywhere. A dark stain was spreading on the floor, leaving ominous marks on the cold surface. The man with glasses turned pale as he recognized the clothes of Lao Zhao and Wang Xiaoli in the scraps of cloth. The man exhaled in shock, asking a terrifying question: had they been eaten? The girl, barely holding back tears, begged to leave this place as soon as possible. The other immediately agreed and, gripped by panic, demanded that Feng Xiu take them out. He repeated Feng Xiu's name, noticing that he suddenly froze and did not respond. Feng Xiu slowly raised his head, his voice calm. The time had come. The man with glasses anxiously interrogated what exactly Feng Xiu meant. Right in front of them, something ominous and unnatural began to form in the air. They froze, feeling the tension in the air becoming unbearable. A figure with long limbs appeared out of the darkness, slowly sliding down from the ceiling. The girl stared at it in horror, her face turning pale and her breath coming in short gasps. The ghastly creature tore downward, its long claws lashing out toward the people frozen in horror. Screams broke the silence, someone screamed for escape, and the others scattered. A man with glasses shouted in panic for everyone to get out of the way immediately. The girl stumbled and reached out to him pleadingly, begging to be saved. But the ghost was too close, its eyes burning with an eerie light and its claws reaching forward. The man in glasses shrieked irritably, realizing that the girl was blocking his path. Without thinking, he pushed her away and rushed forward in an attempt to escape. Feng Xiu calmly watched him as he gasped and desperately called out for help. A piercing scream sounded behind. The ghost had already caught up with the fallen girl. She stretched her hand forward, begging not to leave her, but no one stopped. The ghost grabbed the girl, its cold fingers clutching her neck, robbing her of her last chance to escape. Her voice shook, tears streaming down her face as she continued to beg for help. One of the men screamed in horror as he realized she would no longer survive. A bright light illuminated the space, but it brought no salvation to the doomed victim. The creature lifted her stiffened body with a triumphant look, merging with the darkness. Feng Xiu watched the ghost, realizing that the former surgeon was standing in front of him. The creature was skillfully wielding a scalpel, dismembering the body with frightening concentration. It worked methodically, like a doctor who was used to operating on only one patient. The blade cut neatly through the skin, its movements precise and practiced to the point of automatism. Suddenly, the ghost abruptly raised its head, its mouth open in an inhuman, ghastly smile. Feng Xiu pondered that the murderous nature of the ghost was probably an extension of her past life. The man standing next to him silently looked at him, waiting for a decision on what to do next. Suddenly, someone shouted his name, causing him to instantly pay attention. Feng Xiu clenched his fist without hesitation, his gaze filled with cold determination. In the next instant, he threw a powerful punch, crushing everything that stood in his way. Feng Xiu abruptly recoiled, his eyes widening in surprise as he sensed something wrong. His fist seemed to have struck not flesh, but solid metal like steel. He realized that a normal attack was powerless, and that ghosts only saw humans as prey. A man nearby shouted, calling his name and urging him to flee immediately. But Feng Xiu coldly analyzed the situation, realizing that he had a small amount of time to spare. The man with a trembling voice noticed that the ghost had almost completed its creepy work. Feng Xiu coldly calculated that Li Feifei's body would be enough for the ghost for a few more minutes. The other person turned pale, repeating to himself the terrifying words about amount of flesh. Feng Xiu calmly watched, realizing that they now had a short window of time to act. In front of him lay a mutilated hand, the last traces of life already leaving it. Feng Xiu observed the hand lying on the ground, a strange energy flickering around it. He cautiously reached forward, feeling his fingers pass through that mist. The ghost was still greedily devouring the body, oblivious to what was happening around him. Feng Xiu, who remained calm, confidently grasped the metal surface nearby. A man standing nearby cried out in panic, amazed at his boldness to use the power of ghosts. Feng Xiu calmly stated that he would stay here longer, suggesting that the other man leave first. The man froze in indecision, but then clenched his fists, making a firm decision. Feng Xiu watched him without showing any emotion, waiting for his next move. The man took a deep breath, then slowly extended his hand, still hesitating. Feng Xiu placed his palm on the cold surface without hesitation, preparing for action. The man shuddered from the cold. His body was enveloped by a strange energy that ran like an electric shock. Feng Xiu calmly put his hand on the surface, as if checking something important. The other hesitantly asked if this would lead to something dangerous, but there was no response. He then awkwardly joked that he didn't expect the first touch on a woman's thigh to be like this. Feng Xiu only chuckled, noting to himself that this guy had a pretty good adaptability. Feng Xiu kept a close eye on the time, calculating how much longer he could stay in place. The numbers on the phone screen changed, and the moment of escape had arrived. Without a moment's hesitation, he gave the command to run, abruptly taking off from his seat. The companion asked if Feng Xiu was sure they could get away, and how he knew the way. Feng Xiu briefly replied that he had studied the layout of the building even earlier in preparation. Feng Xiu expected that he could use the terrain features to increase the distance from the ghost. But suddenly, the creature froze as if realizing something, and then abruptly turned its head. He couldn't believe his eyes. The ghost wasn't just moving, it was rapidly approaching. His thoughts were racing. He had obviously miscalculated, for they should have had 2 more minutes. The problem was that Li Feifei's amount of flesh seemed to be insufficient. Feng Xiu tensed up, his gaze snatched something strange on the floor, and suddenly everything became clear. In front of him, amidst a pool of blood, 2 rounded objects lay in front of him, silicone implants. A thought flashed through his mind: this was all a trick, Li Feifei's flesh wasn't real. But the realization came too late. The ghost was already hovering behind him, ready to strike. In the next second, his vision was distorted and his body collapsed like a broken puppet. Feng Xiu felt a strange distortion, his vision flickered and his body seemed frozen in space. Exhaling sharply, he woke up in his previous position, his eyes widened with realization. Instead of the usual rebirth, he was back to the moment when he had only touched his thigh. He wondered if perhaps his ability was being reset by key events rather than time. Lowering his gaze to the screen, he saw the time was 1:01, only a minute had passed since the last cycle. Feng Xiu explained that the first level was in a residential area, and the second level was in the mental hospital they had already entered. He remembered the last time he died because of silicone and clenched his fist with irritation. Feng Xiu firmly stated that he would not make the same mistake now, and resolutely walked forward. He reasoned that the woman's body was completely made of silicone, which meant that it couldn't last long. The guy with the glasses blurted out in shock that it now made sense why it was so huge. The guy with glasses had barely digested what he heard when Feng Xiu confidently said that it was time for them to go downstairs. The group approached the stairs, but suddenly everyone froze when they saw something unexpected up ahead. One of the men shouted Wang Jiting's name in horror, and then shouted that a ghost had grabbed him. Feng Xiu swiftly jumped down, and a panicked scream was heard behind him, begging not to be grabbed. Behind him, the others rushed over, their faces expressing fear, but Feng Xiu remained focused and moved on. A man with a frightened face was breathing heavily, blaming the group for scaring him to death. The guy with glasses asked in surprise why the others were running so slowly down the stairs. One of the men countered that they had already gone down at least 20 floors, but the building still seemed endless. The guy with glasses confusedly stated that it was impossible, since he and Feng Xiu had only gone down 3 floors. The girl irritably called out to Zhao Hao, telling him not to talk nonsense, and then threatened to hit him. One of the men whispered in horror that the ghost was creating walls, causing them to wander. Another confirmed that it was definitely the ghost's mischief, and his face contorted with fear. A third said that his cousin spoke of the ghost's ability to create illusions and walls. He added that everyone who encounters these walls gets trapped and can no longer get out. Feng Xiu, upon hearing this, thoughtfully repeated to himself, "A ghost creates walls?" Feng Xiu silently looked at the anxious people who were waiting for him to make a decision. He suggested those who had unwanted items to throw them on the floor as a marker. One of the men shouted in panic that they should mark the path faster without wasting time. The girl looked down anxiously while the others hurriedly retrieved items. Various things including a bottle and a package fell to the floor with a clatter, marking the route. Feng Xiu calmly announced that they were continuing downstairs and confidently headed towards the stairs. The group hurriedly followed him, but the tension in the air only grew. Suddenly, Feng Xiu stopped abruptly, his shoes sliding down the stairs with an unpleasant sound. The guy with glasses anxiously grabbed his shoulder, as if he sensed the impending danger. At the bottom of the stairs, 3 men appeared in the ominous light, standing motionless in front of the scattered objects. One of the men panicked, recognizing the lighter he himself had thrown a few minutes ago. A girl cried out in horror that her money, which she had just thrown away, was also lying there. The other person shouted in despair that this was indeed the work of a ghost and they were now doomed. Feng Xiu silently watched everything that was happening, remaining outwardly calm and focused. The man with glasses excitedly stated that ordinary people couldn't get out, and they needed to use spirit perception. The man emphatically told everyone to see if anyone had anything that could awaken spiritual perception. He abruptly grabbed the person he was talking to by the hands, trying to elicit a reaction, but no one realized what to do. The memory of the man in the suit popped into his mind, and he hoped it would help. The other participants anxiously glanced around, one of them asking how exactly to test his ability. Feng Xiu stood silently by the stairs, and someone suggested trying it the same way Wang Zong did. Feng Xiu thoughtfully repeated to himself the words about losing one's mind. He remembered that earlier in the mental hospital, the exit from the stairwell was on the right. One of the men looked up anxiously, suddenly realizing something important. Feng Xiu turned away from the others and suggested that they stop their futile prayers, focusing on searching for clues. Someone in the group worriedly thought that something was wrong with Feng Xiu, he was too calm. Someone tensely pondered that Feng Xiu hadn't shown the slightest bit of panic from the beginning. He remembered how everyone had rushed towards the stairs, but the 3 men had stayed behind, and one of them was definitely dead. It bothered him that the 2 men and the girl had remained in the hallway for a full minute, but the ghost hadn't touched them. He wondered if it was possible that they had somehow used the woman's ghost for their own purposes. The man with glasses denied the thought in horror, but something inside him was keeping him in suspense. Feng Xiu silently held out his hand, and the guy with glasses anxiously asked what he was going to do. Feng Xiu started counting as he stepped on the stairs, and concentratedly whispered numbers to himself. When he reached the 15th step, he suddenly stopped as if he had caught a glimpse of something. His eyes widened, he took a sharp breath, and said confidently that he had found it. A massive metal door loomed in front of them, and the guy with glasses astonishedly exclaimed Feng Xiu's name. The guy with glasses stared dazedly at the door, while Feng Xiu remained calm and observed it. The man in the white suit excitedly shouted out that there was indeed a door even though everyone had already seen it. He nervously wiped his forehead and confusedly asked how they should open it now. Feng Xiu looked at the door in concentration and quietly thought that it should lead to their destination. He reached out his hand to the handle, hoping it wasn't locked, and pulled it decisively. Feng Xiu turned the knob forcefully, and there was a loud crack that broke the silence. The door slowly opened, strange black currents rippling behind it, as if calling inside. Bright light streamed from the opening, outlining the silhouettes of people standing in front of the entrance. A man in a white suit laughed hysterically, shouting that they were saved, and rushed forward. Feng Xiu watched silently, his expression remaining impenetrable and cold. People rushed towards the exit in panic, thinking of nothing but their own salvation. The guy with glasses looked at Feng Xiu anxiously and asked why he remained so calm. Feng Xiu noticed that when in danger, everyone only thought of themselves and ran too fast. He coldly warned that one should not use it as a shield unless they wanted to die. Feng Xiu calmly pondered that he had previously just been lucky enough not to encounter ghosts, but now the situation had changed. Feng Xiu stopped abruptly, and the man in the white suit froze with fright upon noticing his gesture. The group stopped in front of the doors, confused as to what they should do next. One of the men suggested they try going left, hoping it was the right way. Another flared up, accusing him of wanting to use him as a test subject instead of going on his own. The man in the white suit looked at Feng Xiu and anxiously asked which way they should go. Someone demanded Feng Xiu to point the way. After all, he was the one who had found the door that connected to the ghost wall. Feng Xiu grinned and reminded them that while running away, everyone was only trying to get rid of him. One of the men became angry, asking if he was just enjoying their fear. Feng Xiu indifferently replied that it didn't matter, as they were just tools to him. Without waiting for a response, he calmly turned around and confidently walked forward without looking back. Feng Xiu pondered that at this moment, the ghostly woman was invulnerable, which meant that he needed to buy time. He coldly came to the conclusion that this would require sacrificing someone else's lives. A loud sound broke the silence, and one of the girls raised her head in horror, trying to realize what had happened. Feng Xiu smiled ominously as he watched the darkness thicken around him and calmly said that it was getting closer. One of the men screamed in panic as they realized that a real ghost was rushing towards them, ready to attack. The creepy ghost with burning eyes raised its weapon, preparing to bring it down on its victim. The people screamed in panic and rushed to escape, desperately demanding that they not be blocked. A man in black clothes turned around in horror and wailed that the ghost was already catching up with them. Sweat streamed down his face as he mentally repeated that he couldn't die, that he had to save himself. Someone's hand grabbed him forcefully and a voice whispered coldly that it was his destiny. The man looked fiercely at the one who had grabbed him and shouted in anger that it was him again. The other man, lying on the floor, screamed Wu Dahai's name in horror, realizing that he was in mortal danger. The realization came too late. His face contorted in fear as the blade pierced through his body. Blood splattered in all directions, coloring the space around him in ominous hues. The fat man sighed heavily as he looked at the corpse and promised that he would burn incense for him for the holidays. Feng Xiu coldly thought that there were no other ways left for someone who had lost his humanity. He looked at the spreading blood and realized that all he had to do now was to continue to act. There was a woman standing in front of him, and he was determined to awaken his spiritual perception as soon as possible. The guy with glasses looked around worriedly and asked where Feng Xiu had disappeared to, not finding him among the others. His heart clenched with anxiety as he whispered Feng Xiu's name in fear, feeling a bad premonition. Feng Xiu stabbed his weapon into his body, a crunching sound was heard, and blood poured onto the cold floor. A mocking voice sounded behind him, someone rebuked him for being greedy, after all, one must share. The other observer smirked, joking that next time he too would like to taste a similar experience. He leaned closer, mockingly asking if touching a living woman was really that pleasant. A thought flashed through one's mind. Perhaps Feng Xiu could awaken his spiritual power. Feng Xiu and his companion walked down the dark corridor, their footsteps echoing in the silence. The companion grinned, wondering if he was afraid that the ghost of the female doctor would kill them. He then added hoarsely that waiting for death was far worse than instant death. Feng Xiu was silent, but there was a tiredness in his gaze as if he was pondering these words. Suddenly, the companion stopped abruptly, noticing something that looked like a restaurant up ahead. Inside the room was an empty bed and an open book on the table, creating a strange sense of coziness. One of the men noticed with a hungry gleam in his eyes that restaurants usually had back doors. Feng Xiu and the others listened while he handed out instructions. First, they needed to find a way out. The other man grinned, promising that even if there was no food here, he would find a treat for his companion. Suddenly there was an order not to move, and the woman with the glasses said confidently that she could do it herself. The people behind the bars perked up, one of them exclaiming excitedly that they were saved. A hand reached for the doorknob, fingers clenched, but something went wrong. Muffled footsteps sounded outside the room, as if someone was leisurely approaching. The resounding thumps of heels echoed on the floor, the tension rising with each passing second. Feng Xiu tensed up, realizing that the approaching figure was that female doctor. They looked at the door, but instead of salvation, a frightening passage into the unknown gaped before them. One of the men shouted in panic that the door was unlocked, but that brought no relief. The woman with glasses hesitated, looking around, and someone muttered quietly about some sort of technical room. The man with glasses fiercely cursed as he realized that there was a dead end ahead and they had fallen into a ghost trap. Feng Xiu pondered, wondering if he had made a mistake in his choice of path, and decided to go left next time. Feng Xiu realized that it was too late to go back, but how many lives would have to be lost? He thought that it might be better to find the ghost himself and be reborn again. A companion remarked anxiously that if he returned, he would inevitably encounter a female ghost. The others began to irritably accuse him of choosing the wrong path, causing a shadow of a smile to touch his lips. Feng Xiu slowly turned towards them, his voice sounding ominous. "You guys." Feng Xiu's companion indignantly reminded the others that no one forced them to follow him. He abruptly threw that if they had abilities, why didn't they make the decision themselves? One of the men stated that they didn't have the power, but at least they wouldn't act so rashly. There was an outcry to stop the argument, for what mattered now was figuring out how to survive the situation. The man in glasses calmly remarked that the creature was attacking one at a time, which meant they needed to pick a victim. A sinister smile appeared on the mysterious figure's lips, and a voice chuckled, "One of us." Feng Xiu watched as one of the men swiftly rushed towards him, seized by anger. The one shouted with rage that if it wasn't for him, nothing would have happened, and raised his hand. Without hesitation, the assailant swung his weapon, declaring that Feng Xiu must atone for his guilt. Feng Xiu's companion screamed in horror, demanding an explanation and begging to be released. Someone shouted desperately, calling for the others to help while Feng Xiu remained in danger. One of the men was caught in a chokehold, his face contorted with anger and fear. He tried to break free, cursing those around him, demanding an explanation as to why no one was intervening. Suddenly, another man pounced on him with a wild scream, madness glittering in his eyes. At this moment, something violently hit the metal door, a deafening sound echoed through the corridor. Feng Xiu glanced around glumly, his voice sounding harsh. Who did this? Disturbed voices were heard in response, some denying guilt, others saying they hadn't seen anything. A woman with glasses asked in a trembling voice whether the person standing at the door was human or something else. Heavy footsteps echoed in the darkness, and the mysterious voice admitted that it had long ago lost interest in humans. But then it chuckled, adding that humans were still more interesting than any strange creatures. Feng Xiu looked at what was happening with a slight chuckle, thinking that these people made the world more interesting. Someone had promised to repay him for everything. An incomprehensible determination flickered in his eyes, as if he had already made a decision. A sharp order rang through the air, and the next moment the body fell to the cold floor, spreading a bloody stain. The survivors didn't waste any time and rushed to flee, their faces contorted with fear and despair. Feng Xiu's companion turned around in horror, holding out his hand and begging him to hold on, but the words were drowned out by the rumble of panic. One of the men rushed forward, resolutely running away from the danger without looking back. A smug smile flashed across his face, and a quiet chuckle escaped his lips, as if he were savoring the moment. But suddenly, his expression changed, fear distorted his features as he realized that something had gone wrong. Feng Xiu, bloodied, raised his head, his lips curved into a grim smirk, his eyes glittering in the semi-darkness. His hand slowly reached forward, fondly touching the cold, motionless leg. Feng Xiu silently looked at the leg in his hand, his expression changed to a puzzled expression. Feng Xiu's companion froze, his eyes widening in surprise as he muttered, "Gone." He tried to object, recalling what he had said earlier, but Feng Xiu calmly replied with a single word, "Silicon." Looking thoughtfully at the object in his hands, Feng Xiu noticed that it was now clear why it was so large. The unknown person suddenly rushed away, his footsteps echoing down the corridor, leaving the others behind. Feng Xiu chuckled softly, his face lit up with a dark, frightening smile full of underlying amusement. The man in the white suit hurried down the stairs, but something was clearly bothering him. He worriedly noted that something strange was happening, the ghost was approaching too fast. Feng Xiu suddenly stopped on the stairs as if realizing something, while the others nervously followed him. One of the fugitives anxiously called out to him, looking down from above, "Feng, brother Shui." The man irritably asked why everyone was running so slowly even though they had already traversed 20 floors. Feng Xiu calmly pointed out that it was probably an illusion. The ghost was causing people to circle in place. One of the men realized with horror that they were just walking in a circle, returning to the same point again and again. He shouted, asking Feng Xiu if he had found a way out since he was standing still so calmly. Feng Xiu's companion, smiling instead of answering, asked why he wasn't running further yet. One of the men cautiously asked Feng Xiu if he had realized some kind of spiritual enlightenment. Everyone was amazed to see that he had found the door immediately, so he knew exactly the right path. Feng Xiu calmly said that there was only 1 minute left, after which the ghost would reappear. One of the fugitives excitedly offered him 5 million if he would lead them out of here. But Feng Xiu only smirked, noting that he was in no hurry, he had one more thing to do before he left. The man tensed up, smiling nervously as he slowly uttered a single word, "What?" Suddenly, Feng Xiu delivered a crushing blow that made the man jerk back in utter shock. Something crunched, and the image of a broken egg flashed before his eyes. There was a shrill scream as the realization hit the victim with unbearable pain. Feng Xiu chuckled coldly as he threw down that 5 million would be useful for the one to cure the eggs. The man was breathing heavily, trying to utter that if money was scarce, he could offer more. He looked at Feng Xiu painfully, puzzled as to why the man couldn't just say it beforehand. The others indignantly demanded an explanation as to why Feng Xiu suddenly attacked and used such a dirty trick. Feng Xiu calmly replied that the ghost was too fast and someone was bound to die in a minute. Now that the injured person couldn't move, he would be the one who would be the victim and the others would be saved. A powerful blow struck with inexorable force, making the air shake with tension. A piercing scream echoed through the corridor, filled with pain and fear of the inevitable. Feng Xiu coldly stared at the victim, calmly saying that he should have died long ago. The man collapsed on the floor, his body no longer moving, and the surrounding people only watched silently. Someone hesitantly muttered that Feng Xiu had acted too cruelly, but no one dared to object. One of the men irritably demanded an explanation, accusing Feng Xiu of senseless cruelty. He wondered why he had first gotten rid of one man and now attacked the manager as well. Feng Xiu calmly replied that he was leaving one as a spare victim. Feng Xiu's companion admiringly remarked that such an approach was quite expected of him. The others, however, shockingly discussed that this was already beyond the bounds of morality. Is he really human? Feng Xiu calmly informs them that the right path is a dead end, and those who want to survive are better off going left. The man in uniform warily asks why then Feng Xiu himself doesn't go left, suspecting a catch. The protagonist indifferently replies that he is waiting for the moment to touch his thighs, while the others have 10 seconds. His words cause confusion. The man with round eyes perplexedly interjects, and the girl freezes in confusion. Another man excitedly exclaims, begging Feng Xiu to give him a chance and take him along. The man excitedly begged Feng Xiu to take him along, but at that moment, there was a scream. A creepy figure with long tangled hair appeared ahead, causing the girl to scream in panic and rush to the side. The order to run to the left sounded, and the men rushed towards the dark corridor without wasting a second, but a sudden sound behind them made them flinch. Two of them held their breath and hid behind a corner, cautiously peering out from behind the wall, their faces reflecting alarm. Meanwhile, Feng Xiu calmly observed the scene. In front of him, two men were trembling on their knees, while a ghostly creature stretched out its arms towards them. One of the men was lying on the cold floor, blood dripping from his mouth and broken glasses lying nearby. He struggled to whisper Feng Xiu's name, begging for help. The wounded man weakly lifts his head, feeling a strange numbness below his waist in confusion. He slowly raises his bloody hand and is horrified to realize that everything around him is soaked in his own blood. A dripping sound is heard behind him, and he staggers to his knees, muttering that it's time to rest. Suddenly his eyes flash with rage and, contorted in anger, he screams that everyone else has come here to die with him. Gathering the last of his strength, he rushed forward, shouting hateful words at Feng Xiu. The wounded man tries to reach Feng Xiu, but the latter calmly assures him that he has no intention of leaving. With a cold expression on his face, the protagonist adds that he'll just stay here and watch the man die. The man reaches out in desperation, but terror grips him as he notices the impending danger. The ghastly creature grabs his face with a greedy smile, robbing him of his last chance of escape. Blood spurts in all directions, drenching Feng Xiu's clothes, but his gaze remains cold and impenetrable. Blood drips onto the floor, and a voice in the void coldly reasons that this is it, the taste of true revenge. The figure in the shadows smirks, fixing his hair and noting with a satisfied expression that this feeling is not bad at all. Suddenly, his heart clenches violently, pulsing brightly, and a wave of unnatural pain runs through his body. The man clutches his chest, breathing heavily, and painful moans tear themselves out, filling the air with anxiety. He laughs suddenly, wide-eyed, questioning if a heart could beat so fast. Someone's voice says the word darling with a shudder, and the space around him seems to begin to distort. A man looks at the ghost woman with a mad smile, muttering that if his wife dies, it will only be at his hands. Feng Xiu sits silently holding the lifeless body by the hips as if evaluating his next thought. In the distance, the two observers are whispering in shock, wondering if he is really touching the ghost's thighs. Feng Xiu slowly raises his gaze, and the man standing across from him steps back, unable to believe his eyes. The man with glasses tearfully shouts that he will save Feng Xiu and get him out of here. He clenches his fists, but suddenly he notices something strange, and he cries out and freezes in suspense. Feng Xiu, covered in blood, slowly approaches, offering to do this together, a frightening calmness in his voice. The bespectacled man recoils in horror, turning pale and calling Feng Xiu a ghost in a stammering voice. Feng Xiu stares forward, pondering that after 21 deaths, his mind is overflowing with vengeance and madness. Feng Xiu looks at the lying body and realizes that it is becoming increasingly difficult for him to feel any emotion. He coldly admits that humanity is slowly fading away, leaving only emptiness inside. Looking at Zhao Hao standing in front of him, he notes that there is a striking difference between them. However, he is not going to force anyone. If one does not want to, Feng Xiu will not insist. Zhao Hao says with a tremor in his voice that he has an ordinary background and unremarkable appearance. Zhao Hao recalls how he was always in the background and only Feng Xiu treated him as a friend. He says with sincerity in his voice that he believes in him, saying those words with a slight smile. However, when he looks at Feng Xiu drenched in blood, he cannot hold back a nervous laugh and an inappropriate joke. Feng Xiu remains silent, his face remaining impassive and his gaze cold and blank. At this moment, with a thud, the dead man's body falls to the floor, drawing everyone's attention. Zhao Hao hurriedly apologizes, nervously waving his hands, assuring that he did not mean to compare Feng Xiu to an animal. Breathing heavily, he leans forward, looking at something in front of him with an expression of doubt and confusion. His hands slowly descend, gingerly touching the rounded shape as if checking the reality of what is happening. He freezes for a moment, then silently extends a finger as if confirming his own thoughts. Feng Xiu squints at this action, his face remaining impassive, but there is a strange expression in his eyes. Zhao Hao, swallowing nervously, tries to understand why Feng Xiu attacked Zheng Tong and Wu specifically. Feng Xiu calmly explains that in the face of a creature that is faster than humans, lives can only be exchanged. He clarifies without emotion who is easier to sacrifice, powerful people or someone who has always been despised. Zhao Hao doesn't have time to reply when Feng Xiu suddenly moves forward and his breath catches. Feng Xiu stares at him intently and nonchalantly asks if he can feel the coldness creeping into his body. Zhao Hao shakes his head confusedly, unsure of how he feels, but still answers in the negative. Feng Xiu observes him carefully and then, narrowing his eyes, firmly states that this is not an illusion. A strange energy flashes around him, and he begins to suspect that it is the influence of the ghost cards. He ponders why he hadn't felt the ghostly energy before, but now it seems to be reaching a tipping point. Suddenly, a thought flashes through his mind. Perhaps this is the foreshadowing of the awakening of spirituality. Zhao Hao moves his hands awkwardly, puzzled as to why he only feels cold and not something supernatural. He suggests that Feng Xiu hurry up, but the latter remains calm and notices that the manager seems to be about to awaken spirituality. On the floor, the injured man is trembling, and a sinister white hand is already slowly reaching for him. Zhao Hao smiles in relief, happy that things are turning out in their favor and they are saved. But then he is overcome with doubt. If spirituality is really awakening, why doesn't he feel anything himself? Feng Xiu calmly explains that although Zhao Hao has been encountering ghosts for a long time, he has never experienced a life or death situation. He adds that his mental state is underdeveloped, so he is simply unable to sense spirituality. Zhao Hao withers thoughtfully, realizing that he has been around Feng Xiu all this time, but he has never experienced true terror. Meanwhile, the ghostly creature slowly approaches Manager Wu, and Feng Xiu coldly notices that he is fat enough to last another 5 minutes. He quickly assesses the situation and concludes that they can afford contact with the ghost for another 2 minutes, leaving 3 for escape. Feng Xiu silently stretches his arm forward, streams of mystical energy swirling around it. Suddenly, his eyes widen in surprise as he felt something strange in his body. Closing his eyes, he concentrates and realizes that this energy is reaching inside, but he doesn't know where. A hunch flashes through his mind. Perhaps all the power is being channeled into the mind, changing its structure. If the mind has no shape, then it means he is able to control it and give it any shape he wants. Inside Feng Xiu, something changes. His heart, surrounded by streams of energy, pulses with incredible power. A bright light engulfs his body, and waves of powerful force tear apart the space around him, as if subjugating it to his will. At the center of this flash, a bright red sphere appears, surrounded by concentric rings of energy. Feng Xiu is overcome by a strange sensation, his body trembling and his mind filled with unfamiliar, chaotic images. He begins to feel everything sharper, every touch, every smell, as if his senses are reaching a new level. Feng Xiu freezes, realizing that his hearing has sharpened to an incredible level. He can feel the taste becoming more intense, as if every sensation has been amplified manifold. Even his thoughts speed up and his muscles fill with power, ready to release at any moment. The world before his eyes becomes clearer, as if a thin veil has disappeared, revealing his true self. He stares thoughtfully ahead, wondering if this is what is called the awakening of spirituality. Feng Xiu feels a strange force distorting his mind, changing his perception of reality. He realizes that spirituality has not yet fully awakened and is now only 1% activated. It becomes clear to him that the abilities of a spiritual master are a manifestation of the power of consciousness and thought. He wonders exactly what power lies within him and what its true manifestation will be. His gaze becomes intense as the most important question pops into his mind. What does he desire most? A flash of bright energy envelopes Feng Xiu, and he is confused as he tries to understand what is happening to him. Suddenly, an unbearable pain pierces his body, and he realizes with a scream that his ability is linked to this sensation. He freezes, stunned by the discovery, and slowly repeats one word to himself: pain. It becomes clear to him that his attacks are capable of transmitting suffering to his victims, making them feel every wound. He realizes that he can make his enemies experience all the pain he has endured as if it were their own agony. Feng Xiu utters the words with a slight chuckle, as if enjoying the discovery of his new ability. He starts laughing loudly, admitting that this power brings him true satisfaction. Zhao Hao looks at him with confusion, amazed by the change, and hesitantly says his name. Feng Xiu smiles madly, wondering if his ability really worked as he intended. His figure is shrouded in ghostly energy, and Zhao Hao stares at him in shock, unable to believe his eyes. Feng Xiu quietly exhaled, Feeling the seconds dragging on, it had already been 2 minutes. He ordered the man to stay away. After all, he was going to test the power of spirituality in practice. The man instantly perked up and excitedly clarified that Feng Xiu had indeed become a spiritual master. An oppressive tension spilled into the air, and ominous whispers sounded around him, foreshadowing something evil. Feng Xiu clenched his fist, feeling the pain of 21 deaths bubbling up in him. Who could resist? Feng Xiu swiftly rushed forward, realizing that with each death, his pain was only accumulating. He realized that his ability was not just restoring him, but making him stronger with each loss. Smirking, he challenged his opponent, promising that he would be the first to experience the blow. His fist, enveloped in sinister energy, whistled through the air as it approached its target. But suddenly, his gaze flashed with tension. Something had gone wrong. Feng Xiu was surprised to notice that his energy suddenly began to dissipate, as if dissolving into thin air. The creature in front of him was rapidly disappearing, leaving behind only a faint trace of spiritual power. Behind him, there was a cheer as someone was clearly enjoying the chaos around him. Feng Xiu gloomily looked at his hand, realizing that his supply of spirituality was completely depleted. At this time, the creature slowly brought the mask up to its mouth, emitting an eerie, piercing sound. Feng Xiu frowned, realizing that the blow did not inflict the expected pain and only transferred spiritual energy. The man next to him anxiously wondered if ordinary weapons were capable of transmitting spirituality. However, his thoughts suddenly changed to playful as he dreamily spoke of something obscene. Feng Xiu paid no attention to him and calmly moved forward, contemplating his next attack. The thought of a suitable weapon flashed through his mind, and a sharp blade flashed through the air. Feng Xiu grinned, realizing that he already had a suitable weapon to attack with. He smoothly lowered himself down, touching the dark energy that snaked at his feet. Taking the gleaming blade in his hand, he swept it across the space, releasing a sinister force. At that moment, a silhouette flashed before him, engulfed in an eerie, almost living flame. The creature recoiled in horror, but it was too late. The spearhead pierced its body with a fierce flash. The creature shuddered, and its body began to warp, sinking into a seething, distorting energy. A bright light flashed, and the creature's face contorted in a grimace of horror, as if it realized its doom. Feng Xiu looked at his surroundings, noticing the many bodies lying in cold disorder. He realized that the scalpel had absorbed the countless sins of this place, becoming a truly gruesome artifact. This meant only one thing: the true origin of horror was this cursed weapon itself. Feng Xiu clenched the scalpel in his hand, feeling its sinister power now fully belonging to him. A predatory smile touched his lips. Would he now be able to kill this female doctor? A man nearby tried to get his attention, but Feng Xiu irritably told him to move away. The man shrugged carelessly, justifying that he had only lightly touched the scalpel. But Feng Xiu was no longer listening as his figure rushed forward with lightning speed. Feng Xiu struck, but the scalpel only slid across the creature's skin without causing any damage. A worried voice sounded behind him. The sound of the strike was clearly wrong. Something had gone wrong. Feng Xiu frowned, realizing that a weapon capable of killing people was useless against her. The man next to him wondered in surprise why this blade didn't work as expected. However, his thoughts soon took a different turn as he noted the smoothness of her skin with delight. Feng Xiu stared at the scalpel with grim bewilderment. A weapon that could kill was suddenly useless. Suddenly he realized the reason. It was because of the spiritual power. Without it, the blade couldn't work. This scalpel required energy to activate, and his own reserves were already depleted. Feng Xiu clenched his teeth, realizing that there was no way to take revenge now. He needed to retreat. Without wasting time, he rushed away, while his companion hurriedly shouted that it was time to flee. The woman in a bloody uniform slowly stepped forward, intermittently repeating the word knife. Feng Xiu felt his senses sharpened. The spiritual power enhanced his perception. Suddenly, he became wary, realizing that someone else was lurking nearby. There were 2 people lurking in the corner. They were clearly trying not to attract attention. Feng Xiu's companion looked around and worriedly asked which of the 4 doors to choose. Feng Xiu and his companion warily froze, noticing something unexpected up ahead. The 2 strangers exhaled a sigh of relief, happy that they had finally been found. Feng Xiu's companion looked at them suspiciously, reproaching them for being the first to flee. The strangers looked away in embarrassment, clearly realizing that there was nothing to say in response. Feng Xiu coldly glanced at the doors and calmly said that the choice was obvious. Feng Xiu looked at the 4 doors in front of him and decided that the only option was to check them one by one. The man next to him nervously reminded him that they were running out of time and could not delay. Feng Xiu coldly threw that there were too many unnecessary words around, and next, let them decide for themselves. The 2 people who were watching them looked at each other fearfully, sensing the rising tension. But before they could say anything, they were horrified as the ghost was rapidly approaching. Feng Xiu clenched his scalpel, guessing that it was his actions that had broken the creature's usual killing cycle. The door ahead suddenly shuddered, as if something behind it was trying to break free. The darkness around him thickened, and Feng Xiu prepared to fight, but someone's voice shouted desperately to run. He abruptly turned around, threw away his weapon, and dashed towards the exit with lightning speed. Behind him, a companion screamed, begging him to wait, but he was immediately yanked forward, unable to stop. The men rushed forward in panic, but a sudden noise behind them made them turn around. Something dark, with a twisted figure and a ghastly smile, came from the ceiling. The creature hissed angrily, demanding the stolen goods back, its voice shaking with rage. It lunged downward, its elongated arms reaching for those who tried to escape. The fugitives' faces contorted with horror, the realization of what was happening making them numb. Feng Xiu's companion shouted, alerting him to the looming threat right behind him. The creature with a distorted face rushed forward, furiously demanding for her knife back. Its body flashed with an ominous light, and its insane eyes glowed with a lust for revenge. It pounced at Feng Xiu, knocking him down and clutching him in a terrifying embrace. With its mouth open, it let out a piercing scream, preparing to tear its victim apart. The creature clutched onto Feng Xiu's neck with force, trying to crush him in a deadly embrace. But in the next instant, its body was pierced by a shock, forcing it to let out an agonizing cry. A sharp surge of force tore through space, throwing him back with a terrifying crack. Feng Xiu calmly realized that he could transfer the pain of his past deaths to the enemy. And together with a mysterious scalpel that could cut through any essence, it became the perfect weapon. Feng Xiu's companion exclaimed in panic, recalling the scalpel, and without wasting any time, he rushed to flee. Looking forward, Feng Xiu saw a spacious room labeled as the northern exit. He quickly walked towards the elevator, hoping that this was their chance to get out of here. But as the doors began to open, a dark silhouette was already waiting inside, exuding an ominous aura. Feng Xiu immediately pressed the button, eager to close the elevator before the creature got any closer. Feng Xiu flinched as a ginormous hand suddenly appeared in front of him, pierced by an ominous energy. A moment later, everything around him was colored scarlet, and his consciousness was filled with a single thought: death. His body was rapidly falling downwards, being dragged into the darkness along with the ghostly figure. The creature with a devilish grin loomed over him, mercilessly clenching its fingers on his throat. The last thing he saw before the world vanished were the flying blood splatters and the word death. Feng Xiu tensely stared at the eastern exit, realizing that this was his last chance to get out. Something inside exploded in protest. He couldn't give up, there was still hope ahead. Although the creature's speed outmatched his, he could use his deaths to calculate her attacks. To him, death and rebirth were now like the gift of foresight, allowing him to memorize every attempt. Remembering his past experiences, he firmly headed to the left, knowing that there was a safe passage there. Feng Xiu once again felt the cold blade on his throat, realizing that this was another death. This time, he was closer to the exit, but once again, he was unable to escape in time, the ninth death. He gritted his teeth, knowing that on his next attempt he would surely reach a safe passage. His companions in the present urged everyone to move towards the eastern exit without hesitation. Wasting no time, the entire group rushed forward as ominous sounds echoed behind them. A sharp blade split the air, and someone's death scream drowned out the chaotic stomping of the fleeing people. One of them, breathing heavily, shouted to run, but panic had already overwhelmed everyone. At the far end of the corridor, just above the ground, something with long tangled hair was hovering. The guy with glasses opened his eyes wide and shouted, calling out to Feng Xiu, his voice trembling with fear. Feng Xiu turned around sharply, but he didn't have time to react. The terrifying claws were already rising behind him. The sharp claws dug into Feng Xiu's face, throwing him back before he could react. The creature opened its snake-like eyes wide, noticing something unexpected, and there was a pause in the air. Feng Xiu, barely able to stay on his feet, exhaled a short "oh" as if he was not surprised at all by what was happening. The monster slowly bowed his head, clenching his fingers. His silence seemed like an ominous harbinger of something terrible. The guy with glasses froze, stunned, muttering not realizing what had just happened. The creature let out a sinister chuckle as it watched Feng Xiu calmly turn away and walk away down the corridor. But suddenly, it exploded with rage, rushing forward screaming that this time he would die. Feng Xiu easily dodged, his movements were quick, as if he had already anticipated the attack. His body was glowing with energy enhanced by spiritual power, making every movement even more rapid. The guy with glasses gasped in admiration as he clenched his fists and rapturously remarked that Feng Xiu was really amazing. The guy with glasses admired Feng Xiu, but the creature contorted into a crazy smile, preparing for another attack. It rushed forward with wild fury, its movements were fast and its strength seemed destructive. Feng Xiu tensed up, mentally noting that this time he was able to accurately predict its trajectory. With a sharp movement he dodged, rolling across the floor, but he was still in danger. The creature didn't slow down and lunged at him again, its claws slicing through the air with frightening speed. The creature dashed forward, but Feng Xiu bounced back just in time, leaving its attack wasted. He moved precisely and quickly, anticipating the strikes and dodging each one without error. The creature stopped abruptly, sinking to the ground, its movements becoming increasingly irritated. Its eyes flashed with rage, and its voice trailed off into an angry command to just die. Feng Xiu silently turned around to the long corridor, his gaze stopping at the closed door ahead. Feng Xiu silently stared at the door, while the anxious people behind him were perplexedly discussing what had happened. They were trying to figure out if he was able to dodge, and at the same time, the monster crashed into the floor with a rumble. The guy with glasses wondered with bated breath if Feng Xiu was a master of spiritual power. Meanwhile, Feng Xiu himself noticed the signboard and was relieved to see the signpost again. He focused his gaze on the green sign, hoping that this was indeed the real exit. Feng Xiu looked at the exit, mentally affirming that they now had a chance to escape. But suddenly, the creature made a strange sound, abruptly stopped and froze in place. It slowly backed up, never taking its intense gaze off him, as if sensing a threat. The voice in the monster's head was shouting for it to leave, and Feng Xiu wondered why it had stopped chasing. His eyes narrowed as he tried to understand. Was it really afraid of something stronger? Feng Xiu wondered if the creature was really afraid, and if so, what exactly was it afraid of? At that moment, something massive came crashing down from above, causing the guy with glasses to freeze. He cried out, realizing he couldn't dodge in time, and his face contorted in horror. The others watched in a daze as something collided with him, causing a sharp noise. He touched his face in shock, perplexed as to what had just happened, and noted a strange sensation, icy but soft. The guy with glasses looked around confusedly, trying to figure out if the creature had disappeared and where Feng Xiu was. He hurried over to him, anxiously asking if everything was all right and why that strange woman had run away. Feng Xiu thoughtfully noted that by conventional logic, the exit should have been their salvation. However, his gaze narrowed when he sensed that something was not right in this place. The guy with glasses waited anxiously for an explanation, while Feng Xiu pondered why the creature ran away at the sight of the signpost. Feng Xiu carefully looked at the signboard, realizing that if the creature was afraid of it, then it wasn't a real exit. Behind the door lurked something so terrifying that even that woman chose to run away. He felt that on the other side stretched only endless darkness devouring everything around him. A comparison to the gaping maw of a bottomless abyss, into which there was no return, flashed through his mind. The others were puzzled, asking why he wasn't going forward. Was there something wrong with this exit? Feng Xiu calmly offered a break, giving everyone a chance to recover from the tense moment. The guy with glasses sighed in relief, noting that after long minutes of running, a little respite wouldn't hurt. The girl, breathing heavily, sat down on the floor, recognizing that she had never been so happy to see the signpost before. Feng Xiu looked focused, but inside him, a new plan of action was already ripening. Without saying a word, he suddenly stood up and headed onward, leaving the others completely bewildered. Feng Xiu confidently said that it was time to move on, not giving the others any time to ponder. Behind him, the people behind him tensely froze, sensing something strange as a mysterious energy condensed around them. Feng Xiu looked ahead, mentally hoping that their path would be smooth and without unexpected traps. A massive grate appeared ahead, behind which the muffled sounds of heavy breathing could be heard. His hand slowly reached for the bars, ready to open the passage and discover what lurked within. Feng Xiu stared intently at the door, wondering if there was any real danger lurking behind it. The guy with glasses worriedly asked if it was really a safe path, since there shouldn't be any threats there. Feng Xiu replied that even if there was danger, they had no choice but to move on. There was a strange tension in the air as they cautiously stepped deep into the unknown space. The darkness was so thick that the outlines of the surrounding world completely dissolved in front of them. The silence around them was so deep that the guy in the glasses noted fearfully that he couldn't even hear his own thoughts. The darkness closed in behind them, cutting off the way back and turning them into prisoners of the endless void. Feng Xiu realized that he had no choice but to go forward, hoping to find a way out. As he walked into the unknown, his body felt like it was losing its footing as he fell deeper into the darkness. Time disappeared along with the light, leaving only the feeling of falling into an endless void. Feng Xiu continued walking, but it seemed like there would be no end to this path, the darkness consuming everything around him. His gaze narrowed, the thought flashed through his mind that something was clearly wrong here. Suddenly the darkness began to dissipate, revealing before him the vague outlines of a familiar place. The entrance to the White Willow Academy appeared in front of him, causing him to ask a mute question. He looked around, seeing the familiar buildings against the scarlet sky, and quietly muttered that it was strange. Feng Xiu looked up at the sky, silently asking himself if he had really made it outside. Behind him, the others finally got out, looking at the familiar terrain with relief. The guy in glasses excitedly clarified if this was really the way out and how they had gotten out in the first place. Without wasting any time, he suggested that they should rather get away from this strange place. But Feng Xiu didn't move, sensing that something was wrong here, and wondered what it was. Feng Xiu suddenly realized something important. It was like lightning flashed in his mind. He mentally built a connection between the mental hospital and the academy, suspecting something strange. His gaze turned serious as he wondered, was it really only Bai Lu out of them who could get away? He wondered why they didn't encounter any more danger, and if it had anything to do with that woman. The guy with glasses tiredly suggested that they go home and rest, as this night had exhausted everyone. The guy with glasses reminded them that they still had a lot to do tomorrow and they should prepare. He clarified that they should just go home and go to work, receiving a short reply from Feng Xiu. But suddenly, Feng Xiu's eyes widened, as if he had realized something important. His body lit up with a strange energy, and a worried expression appeared on his face. He looked down in horror, realizing that something had disappeared, and he muttered to himself. Feng Xiu stared in shock in front of him, realizing that this was impossible, and exclaimed that it couldn't be like this. He looked around and a frightening thought resounded in his mind. The ghosts had disappeared, but why and where to? The city in front of him looked perfectly ordinary, as if nothing supernatural had ever happened. He could accept that the mental hospital was gone, but he couldn't accept one thing. The guy with glasses was fearfully calling him to come back, warning him that it was too dangerous to stay here. Feng Xiu tensely thought about the mysterious disappearance of the ghosts, realizing that this was not normal. He stared at the street in confusion, pondering how something supernatural could just disappear. His thoughts suddenly shifted to someone special, his dear wife, who had always occupied his mind. Determination flashed in his eyes as he mentally stated that only his hands could cut her life short. He concentrated, his gaze becoming cold and focused, full of unstoppable determination. The car raced down the dark road, headlights cutting through the night. Inside, tension hung in the air. The passenger in the back seat hissed, his face contorted with fear. He groaned, muttering, "No, no." Feng Xiu, slouching down, whispered in a trembling voice that it was impossible to disappear, especially to his wife, never. His gaze was clouded with despair, his lips trembled, but his words sounded firm, "Wife, you can't leave." The cab stopped, the driver announced the amount, but Feng Xiu stared in front of him, clenching his fists. Feng Xiu jumped out of the car, rushing away, and the driver shouted at him, demanding him not to run away. There was another indignant shout from behind, the cab driver reminding him that the ride was unpaid. Feng Xiu ran up the stairs, his footsteps echoing, his thoughts reeling in chaos. His chest clenched, let the whole world disappear, but not her, not his wife. He opened the door, froze, and there was only an empty, cold room in front of him. Feng Xiu froze in the midst of the void, the cold darkness pressing down on him from all sides. He sank to the floor, his gaze blank and a huge hole gaping in his chest. Through clenched teeth, he whispered that he had killed 18 times, and was always alone. His fingers trembled as he clutched the cloth, and the agonizing question in his head was, how to go on living. He looked up into the void and bitterly exhaled a single word, wife. Feng Xiu walked forward, remembering how many times he had died while being driven mad by his wife and that female doctor. It was his hatred for them that kept him alive, preventing him from finally breaking down. He swore he would take revenge on the ghosts, make them feel all that pain. But suddenly his thoughts were interrupted, something changed, as if disrupting the usual order. Now the ghosts were gone, and the emptiness around him seemed strangely unfamiliar. Feng Xiu lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling, while inside, one question was eating away at him. If hatred no longer drove him, where would all this rage be directed now? His eyes were blank, his thoughts jumbled, when suddenly the phone rang, breaking the silence. A worried voice came from the speaker. The news was reporting a fire at Bailey Academy. Feng Xiu sat up abruptly, his heart clenched, and his hand automatically reached for the phone. Feng Xiu stared at the screen where the news was flashing, but his mind was clouded. His head drooped, his shoulders shook, and suddenly, a quiet laughter burst out from his chest. He laughed louder, realizing the irony of it all. Could even he, an immortal, really die? But if the mysteries weren't over, then someone was just playing hide and seek with him. His eyes fluttered open, his lips trembled, and he once again whispered a single word, Wife. Feng Xiu smiled widely, madly, his eyes sparkling. He could see it again. A rebuke message appeared on his phone screen. Why was he still not at work? The alerts came one after another, the same question repeated like a broken record. He laughed, throwing back his head, finding it ridiculously funny. People die, but they are still called to work, as if they had become ghosts of the corporation after their death. A bright scarlet liquid spread across the surface, droplets dripping down, creating an eerie pattern. Feng Xiu looked at the screen where the message texts were stained with something that looked like blood. A sinister voice came from the darkness, wryly stating that silence does not hide the truth. An eye pulsing with eerie energy stared directly at him, uttering terrifying words. The voice ordered him to follow it, and the tone left no chance of refusal. Feng Xiu grabbed the throbbing mass, squeezing it as if he was going to crush it. He coldly apologized, saying that he only had one phone and asked not to borrow it. A shriek echoed through the air and the creepy entity dissipated, leaving behind only a trail. He looked thoughtfully at his hand, grinned, and recognized that illusions were getting more and more interesting. Without further ado, he got on his bike, intending to find out what was going on. Feng Xiu stopped the bike, scrutinizing the place where something strange had happened. A building loomed in front of him, its charred walls still exuding faint smoke. He didn't hesitate to flip off the police tape as he made his way inside, smelling the burning odor. A burning aroma wafted up his nose. He wondered how realistic the effect was. A group of people had gathered up ahead, all of them looking at the building anxiously. Feng Xiu walked closer, and one of the people present remarked with a smile that he was early today. She laughed, adding with a playful note that he was annoying her as always. Feng Xiu chuckled, not surprised by her reaction, as if he knew in advance that she would say that. He continued walking, his footsteps echoing on the wooden flooring. Suddenly, someone ran forward and panting, asked if he was also forced to come. Feng Xiu calmly replied that he enjoyed his work, but his interlocutor immediately remembered Wu Daha. He was in the office cubicle as if nothing had happened, as if he wasn't dead. There were employees sitting in the room, busy with their work, but there was something unnatural about this picture. Feng Xiu wondered, if the dead were still alive in his memory, then what was reality? Suddenly, someone's voice loudly called out to him, causing him to turn his attention to the manager's office. The manager angrily jabbed his finger at Feng Xiu, demanding him to explain why he had come so late. Feng Xiu, without expressing emotion, calmly asked when he would be paid his commission. The manager snorted, calling him disgusting even after death, and grinned. His face contorted with rage and he shouted, demanding an explanation of who was considered dead here. Someone on the staff irritably threw to speak like a human, stating that he was perfectly alive. Feng Xiu threw a punch, interrupting the angry tirade, and the opponent collapsed backwards with a contorted face. That person's eyes widened, his face turned purple, and his breathing became intermittent as if he was being strangled by something. Nearby, another man, bleeding, hoarsely let out a weak plea for help. Feng Xiu remained unperturbed, his movements swift and his punches deadly accurate. The person lying on the floor tried to say something, but only gulped for air, looking up desperately. The body collapsed to the floor with a thud, leaving behind a trail of blood. Feng Xiu looked down and mockingly asked if he was really dead now. His gaze narrowed, a question flashed in his mind, making him wonder. Suddenly, the space around him distorted, the figures hung in the air like frozen shadows. Feng Xiu stepped forward, grabbed the other person by the chin, and irritably asked what was even going on. Feng Xiu noticed how the person in front of him lowered his head, hiding his face in the shadows. Suddenly, that one's body began to deform, wriggling in an eerie transformation. Feng Xiu's eyes narrowed, he calmly asked if the one was really transforming into something else. A dark aura swirled around, but Feng Xiu only leaned forward, preparing for action. He abruptly rushed forward, stating that he was going to interrupt the spell, preventing the transformation from being completed. Sparks flashed in the air, energy raging around him, shaking the space. The figure in the shadows finally took shape, shrouded in a strange eerie glow. The creature sank heavily onto one knee, its silhouette seeming unstable. Feng Xiu stepped forward, throwing a mocking question as to whether or not it had had enough fun. He calmly looked forward and offered to step out if the game was already over. Feng Xiu stood motionless, realizing that everything that was happening was just an artificially created dream. The man in front of him panicked and backed away, panting and begging not to come closer. Feng Xiu bowed his head, repeating the word to himself as if weighing its meaning. Touching his forehead, he calmly concluded that this was the strength of his opponent. In the distance, something stirred, distorted shadows crept along the walls, flaring with sinister energy. A strange sight unfolded in front of Feng Xiu, something alive pulsing amongst the sinister patterns. He grinned as he twirled the object in his hands, and noted with a note of regret that his opponent did not understand the main point. Touching another man's skin caused him no fear or doubt, only mild interest. The voice in front of him trembled with incomprehension, asking why he wasn't afraid of these touches. Feng Xiu remarked with a smile, his opponent was killing through fear, but it was useless against him. Feng Xiu grinned, noting how creepy it was to work even while dead. He admitted that the endless fears only made him more willing to live and see reality. A sharp sound echoed down the corridor, but he calmly continued walking forward. The dark entity hissed, muttering that it remembered him, a man without fear. Feng Xiu thought about it. This was the essence that had once frightened the female doctor, but it was too weak. In the cold light of the lamps, the man with the distorted face is frozen in fear, trembling with terror. The scientist tenses his fingers, explaining that this entity is the result of gruesome human experimentation. He rushes forward, shouting with desperation in his voice that he will save his brother at any cost. But before he can do anything, someone's head explodes in a bloody splash. The crowd rushes to the emergency exit in panic, realizing that the monster has the ability to control dreams. The crowd tensely listens as Feng Xiu warns that the most important thing is to stay awake. They step out onto a lighted path where there doesn't seem to be a single anomaly. Feng Xiu looks at the blade at his neck without emotion, realizing that this is another dream. He calmly explains that Zhao Hao will have to overcome his fear to get out. Feng Xiu adds that the new entity is creating frightening illusions, completely distorting reality. Feng Xiu firmly tells Ru Tian that fear is the only thing keeping him from surviving. With a smile, he adds that in the illusion, you can test reality by pinching Li Feifei. Zhu Tian embarrassedly admits that he has never touched the real one, only the illusory one. Feng Xiu quietly realizes that by living the same dream, he can quickly snap out of it. But the others, no matter how much he restarts their nightmares, are unable to overcome the horror. Feng Xiu realizes that everyone's dreams are different, but each one is completely created by an entity. After experimenting, he becomes convinced that everything that happens is just an artificial illusion. This means that only the person in the nightmare can break the nightmare. Feng Xiu looks at Zhu Tian and calmly tells him to wake up. Zhu Tian opens his mouth in fear, his body trembles and his consciousness fluctuates between reality and dream. Feng Xiu doesn't hesitate to bring his hand in and hits Zhu Tian with all his might. The blows follow one after another, echoing in the silence of the room. But Zhu Tian only makes muffled sounds, remaining in a deep sleep. Feng Xiu looks at him bewilderedly, amazed that even that didn't help. Realizing that another method is needed, he activates the force, preparing to try something different. Feng Xiu doesn't hesitate to strike, his blade erupting with sinister energy. The blade pierces through Zhu Tian's arm, blood splatters and the air is filled with an eerie aura. Zhu Tian gasps in panic, his voice trailing off into a hoarse, pleading cry. He recoiled, fear distorted his face, and Feng Xiu watched his reaction carefully. Looking at the seething darkness, Feng Xiu gloomily ponders whether it is even possible to save him. Feng Xiu frowns, preparing to try one last method before abandoning this venture. He resolutely swings his blade, knowing that there may be no other way out. Zhu Tian animatedly recounts how he was cradled by a beautiful feminine entity in a dream. With a dreamy smile, he sighs, wishing he had time to kiss her. Suddenly, someone points to the door, exclaiming that they found an emergency exit. Zhu Tian excitedly exclaims that once he gets out, he will definitely find a woman to touch. Feng Xiu, observing him, notes that despite being shy, he has one outstanding trait. Realizing that fear cannot be overcome, he decides to replace it with another strong emotion. He immediately instructs Zhu Tian to turn on his phone and turn the volume to maximum. With a slight smile, Feng Xiu advises him to run his favorite movie on the speaker. Zhu Tian turns on the video, and a strange bright light flashes around. A bewitching teacher appears on the screen, hinting at a special private lesson. Zhu Tian is shocked by what is happening, a blush flooding his face. The teacher smiles coquettishly, holding the ruler to her lips and saying that he deserved the punishment. Feng Xiu irritably states that watching this now is like taking a dump in the street. Zhu Tian's eyes widen, pupils spiraling from an overabundance of emotion. Feng Xiu states with a serious look that this is not a joke, but a way to save his life. Zhu Tian sighs, reluctantly agreeing to fulfill the strange order. He starts the video, and an animated image of a kiss appears on the screen. The voice in the video demands total immersion, making him visualize himself as a student. Zhu Tian, blushing, slowly smiles, accepting his new reality. He looks around bewildered, unable to believe he was in this situation. A bewitching teacher appears in front of him, and a tense moment hangs in the air. Suddenly, he starts showering the people around him with kisses, completely immersed in the illusion. His glasses glisten, hearts fly around him, and he completely loses touch with reality. Zhu Tian falls into ecstasy, showering the air with kisses, and hot sparks erupt around him. He breathes heavily, completely immersed in his fantasy as if nothing else exists. Feng Xiu observes this with a cold expression and calmly says that it's time to move on. He reminds him that everything seen in dreams is a lie, and fear is the only thing that kills. With a slightly skeptical look, Feng Xiu silently assesses the absurdity of what is happening. Zhu Tian sighs tiredly, admitting that he even misses his wife after the experience. Behind them lie two disfigured bodies that were unable to escape from the nightmare. Feng Xiu stares ahead nonchalantly, hoping that Zhao Hao will be able to cope. Meanwhile, Zhu Tian, immersed in the illusion, continues to obsessively search for kisses. Suddenly, he himself receives a powerful blow to the face, interrupting his romantic fantasies. Feng Xiu is surprised to notice that Zhu Tian boldly approaches ghosts if they are attractive. Suddenly, his eyes widen with shock when he notices something unexpected. Zhu Tian flies up into the air, surrounded by flashes of energy, as if something within him had awakened. Feng Xiu watches with cold interest, realizing that he is awakening spiritual power. Zhu Tian screams in terror, his face contorted with fear and his eyes wide open. Zhu Tian screams in panic, trying to stop Li Feifei, but she runs away. He blinks puzzledly, trying to realize where he's ended up and what's going on. Looking around, he anxiously asks if this is really the emergency exit. Feng Xiu stares at him silently, his face remaining impassive and impenetrable. Zhu Tian watches him warily, doubting whether this is really Feng Xiu. Zhu Tian resolutely reaches out to Feng Xiu, demanding to pinch him to check the reality. Feng Xiu notes with a slight sneer that his brain has finally started working, albeit only slightly. Thoughtfully, he lists the strange names from Zhu Tian's search history, causing Zhu Tian to panic. Zhu Tian cries out in horror, accusing him of looking into his phone. In the commotion, he loses his balance and falls right on top of the others with a loud scream. Zhu Tian is breathing heavily, stunned after the fall, trying to recover. His gaze falls on the distorted, bloodied faces of the people who couldn't get out. He mumbles a question in confusion, but Feng Xiu coldly confirms their demise. Without further ado, Feng Xiu turns to leave and calmly says that it is time to go. He puts his hand on the heavy door and it creaks open. Feng Xiu and Ru Tian step out into the blinding light, leaving the nightmare behind. Zhu Tian flinches at the unexpected sound, looking around warily. With a joyous cry, he turns to Feng Xiu, jubilant that they made it out. Feng Xiu calmly confirms this while standing in front of the swirling aura. He looks at Zhu Tian and asks with interest if he has awakened his spiritual power. Zhu Tian is stunned, not understanding what spiritual power he is talking about. He recalls a strange sensation in the illusion, as if his perception was beyond his normal senses. Feng Xiu calmly clarifies what kind of ability he has awakened. Zhu Tian spreads his hands in despair, realizing that he didn't feel any special powers. Trying to distract himself, he changes the subject and curiously asks what Feng Xiu's ability is. Feng Xiu calmly says that his ability is to see the future, and a mysterious glow emanates from him. Zhu Tian exclaims that it is now clear how Feng Xiu knew the path and location of the exit. Feng Xiu ponders that there is indeed a powerful, anomaly-related organization in the world. He realizes that foresight is more advantageous than combat ability, because it will help raise his status in the organization. His gaze turns grim as he thinks about the need to gain power for revenge, especially for his wife. Feng Xiu reflects that in his perception, Qingshan Psychiatric Hospital was built into an office building. He wonders why he can't see it anymore now, as if it has disappeared. The thought occurs that perhaps when the anomalous domain merges with reality, it hides among ordinary objects. He recognizes that they were lucky to encounter an entity that creates illusions but has no attacking abilities. Even with a death trap, they could have been stuck inside forever without finding a way out. Feng Xiu coldly ponders that in front of absolute strength, everything else loses importance. He realizes that no matter how many times they try, some things might remain unchanged. With doubt, he asks Zhu Tian if he sees any anomalies around. Zhu Tian looks around restlessly, surprised to notice that there really isn't anything nearby. Feng Xiu squints his eyes and admits that he may have just mistaken the bird for an entity. Zhu Tian shudders in horror, wondering if it is possible that even with spiritual power, he is unable to see entities. Feng Xiu ponders that maybe that's not the case, but that Zhao Hao is simply too weak. He hopes that there will be someone else besides him who can discern anomalies. Zhu Tian irritably thinks that he is jealous of Feng Xiu's ability, but at the same time, he doesn't want to be weaker. Unable to find a place, he suggests that he should leave this place as soon as possible, but Feng Xiu silently continues walking forward. Feng Xiu turns around puzzled, not immediately realizing what Zhu Tian is talking about. Zhu Tian excitedly explains that he just followed him and completely immersed himself in the movie. Feng Xiu recalls that the entity had appeared in front of the team before, but something was different this time. He concludes that Zhu Tian probably influenced the situation in some way. He then snidely asks why the one in the illusion was grabbing air and kissing, causing Zhu Tian to blush in horror. Feng Xiu adds with a smirk that Zhu Tian was not only making movements but also making sounds. Zhu Tian covers his ears in panic, begging not to continue anymore because it's too embarrassing. Feng Xiu speculated that he might have made a mistake when waking up in the illusion, causing him to not get the ability. Zhu Tian, blushing, hesitantly says that nothing much really happened. He confesses that he kept his eyes closed the whole time, completely immersed in fantasizing about the female teachers. In his imagination, the teacher is gently leaning in, her breath warm and tantalizing. Zhu Tian, all red, clasps his eyes shut, making a dreamy sound, completely immersed in the illusion. But suddenly, the environment changes, a frightening voice sounds around, whispering words of death. He remembers suddenly hearing the ominous, blood-chilling sounds in the darkness. And then he felt cold hands, like the touch of a ghostly doctor, sliding over his body.